Keith, thank you for coming by today.
My honor.
Why don't you give us a little insight into your background, how you got into the business of being a professor that focuses on the sports industry?
Sure. Well, grew up in Southern California, Gardena and Cerritos. One was more urban and the other near Orange County, and played all the sports growing up. Actually played baseball on the streets in the 70s in a predominantly African-American neighborhood back when there were many baseball players. And so sport was always a part of what I did, and education tied to it from my parents, instilling those values in me, I think propelled me to end up what I'm doing now, which was always trying to figure out academic and athletic identity. And so, as a player, I kind of got the label as the one that studied, playing center. I was the smart guy. And I always remember one time my senior year, my offensive line coach really empowered me. We were running some trick plays this particular week, preparing for it during the week, and he said, "Harrison, you're the intellectual one. Tell the offensive line what the element of surprise means." And I went into this diatribe, and then they all teased me. But, he gave me a high five. And just for him to do that, I think it stayed with me. So currently, I'm at the University of Central Florida in my 4th year via Arizona State 2 years, via Michigan Ann Arbor for 7, and Washington State for 2 after I finished my doctorate at USC. Backing up a little bit, one of the things that inspired me to do what I'm doing is in 1994-95, the NCAA convention came to San Diego. I had been communicating with Dr. Richard Lapchick and got my dean, Dean Hitchkey, to let me take off Saturday's class and drive down to San Diego. Little would I know that I would meet another one of my images, mentors, and role models, Professor Ken Shropshire, was also there. And but it's just, it's full circle. I'm here today because I met Ken, met you there, and met Richard there, and would meet Harry Edwards a couple years later. And I think those 3 images really inspired me to want to write about race and sport, to study race and sport, and saw that there weren't many people that were African-American doing this important work.
Now, where you are now, you're with one of the preeminent scholars on issues related to race and sports, Richard Lapchick, but you've also taken some great strides on your own and doing some things that are unique in the scholarly world, and that's your Scholar Baller program. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and then talk about practically how you're applying some of that this weekend?
Sure. One of the research projects that I've been doing that really buttresses and supports Scholar Baller is with my colleague Jeff Stone, a social psychologist out at the University of Arizona, and we look at stereotype threat in classroom settings and testing situations. And actually what we're finding, we just got a unique finding that no one's found yet in these experiments, where basically the student athletes come in, men and women, and in our first wave of studies, the female student athlete, when you tell them they're a scholar athlete, they have dissonance with both those identities, and they actually do worse on the test. When you think about the female student athletes are the top performer academically of anyone on campus, it lets you know that we have these labels and stigmas out there that people are battling. When you look at the male student athletes, when you don't look at race, the men do better when you tell them they're a scholar athlete than the women. So
this is an extension of Dr. Steele's studies
at
Stanford that look at general students. You're looking specifically at the student athlete.
That's correct. What happened is they actually had a conference on stereotype threat, and Jeff Stone was out there with Claude Steele and about 8 others. And we actually have a book coming out now where I have a chapter on all of this. But Claude looked at standardized tests. Then Jeff Stone came along and looked at basketball and golf performances based on telling people of color that they're natural athletes versus telling mainstream whites that they have a high IQ. When you tell blacks that they have a high IQ sport-wise, they do worse. If you tell whites they're natural athletes, they do worse on all these athletic performances. So then I come along with Jeff, and we both say, let's put that in the classroom. And so there's only been 3 empirical studies looking at how student athletes test. The good news comes about now relates to Hoop Dreams and my passion for urban youth, particularly black youth, is we found in a new set of studies that when you tell black college student athletes that they're an athlete, they do better on the academic test. And I've been arguing this, and others, Todd Boyd, Shropshire, Harry Edwards, that athletic identity isn't necessarily a negative attribute, particularly for African Americans. It's how it's framed in different situations, whether that be career transition or testing. So this is a very unique finding that we're getting ready to submit to one of the experimental journals.
So let me make sure I understand. So Claude Steele's foundational finding is that if you go into a testing setting and you remind an African American that African Americans tend to do less well on standardized tests, exactly, that will bring their performance down. But if you don't make that mention, or
if you remind African Americans that they're an athlete, they do better than whites in a testing situation. If you tell academically engaged African Americans they're a scholar athlete, though, it did replicate our previous work and Claude's work, they do worse.
Okay, so tell us about the specifics of the Scholar Baller program,
sure,
and the things you do at schools around the country. And
definitely. And how it connects is we created Scholar Baller to try to bridge the gap between academics, athletics, and entertainment. In other words, we want to make school cool. So with the studies I just discussed where it's connected, there needs to be a self-affirming intervention a la being a scholar and a baller, which is a ball player and athlete. So we have about 75 schools across the country, high school, community college, university level, teams and individuals that if they have a 3.0 or better, and sometimes that varies depending on the institution, they wear our logo, which is a patch of a think man if it's a man, and a think woman if it's a female. Really has taken off at different institutions once you get it in the culture, that level of recognition. We have a curriculum program that's usually used at the lower levels, high school and community college. The universities really want to use our incentives, which goes beyond the patch to hats, shorts, etc. This weekend, for Family Weekend, Columbia plays, the University of Pennsylvania, and later tonight at about 8:30, I'll be speaking to 35 of the Scholar Ballers at Columbia University that will be competing against the Quakers on Saturday. We've been working with Columbia about 4 years. When we started, they had about 14 players with a 3.3 cumulative is the marker they use. I'm happy to say after 4 years, they have 35 Scholar Ballers. This is important when you think about an Ivy League institution with student athletes where it's assumed that they will graduate, which the Ivy Leagues have about 100%, near 100% graduation rate. But we were actually able with the Scholar Baller program to get them to compete a little bit more and achieve a higher performance.
The last thing I want to talk to you about is the Black Sports Scholars Roundtable, which was founded officially, I'd say, a year ago by a group of scholars focused on issues important to African Americans and African American athletes. Mm-hmm. And it's a group that was founded in San Francisco, at Wharton's campus in San Francisco, during a gathering of predominantly African American scholars. How did you first become involved with the group, and what do you see as the future of this group and the kinds of impact that it might have?
So coming into the Black Scholars group, moving from an informal meeting a few years ago to the meeting in 2009 has been great. I parallel it to being at the Grant Hill's first All-Star game. He said he just wanted to walk around and get autographs. And that's how I feel about the Black Scholars group. There's a different perspective, being an African American, being black in America, even in a world that's becoming more and more global. But to be around intellectuals that study what you do and particularly, relate to you culturally, it inspires you to do this great work. I think the mission of the group is to make sure those of us that are in the academy that are African American writing and researching these issues succeed, whether that be with tenure, whether that be with promotion, and also to collaborate as a group with some tangible products is, I think, our next goal.
Any other issues you want to make sure we talk about?
Only issue I want to bring up, and it's related to Scholar Baller, is often when we're looking at the sport landscape, pro, college, youth, parents, substance abuse in sport, we forget to talk about the positive. And so I'm hoping in my lifetime that we'll have a 24-hour channel that shows the great things about sport. My boss, Richard Lapchick, talks about this. He's a true believer in sport. We need to talk about Myron Rowe, graduated in 5 semesters, went on to get his master's degree in cultural anthropology at Oxford, was a Rhodes Scholar. We just need to highlight the achievements, whether it's the scholar athletes this weekend at Penn, the 35 Scholar Ballers at Columbia. I think sometimes we only read the negative things in sport, whether it be Brett Favre and his texting or sexting, as they call it now, Reggie Bush, etc. We just want to focus on things that are positive.
Great. Thank you.